What's up, everybody? It's another Friday night. Welcome to the Skeptical Help Bar. And tonight is going to be a fun night. I'm going to have fun. I know I'm going to have fun because we got somebody special. And, oh, hello, Stacey. She's chiming in already. That's awesome. Before we get started, let me go over the rules. First, we are streaming live on WLFE-DB Radio Network, which is cool. It's a radio network. You know, it's cool. I take what I can get. And I'm also broadcasting on my I Am Kenny Biddle page and my own personal page. So if you're not seeing all the comments, that's why. It's going out to a lot of people. But tonight, the rules, as always, for anyone that has never been here before, the rules are, 1, this is for paranormal-related questions for you to ask me and maybe a guest that I might have on in a little bit. And I give you, in return, my skeptical opinion, usually backed by good information, science, critical thinking, all that kind of jazz. So it's not just an opinion. I try to give you as much information as possible. Rule number 2 is that I don't know everything. Even though I like to think that I do, I don't. So if I don't know it, I'll tell you. We'll look it up. I have Google open on the screen over here, so we can look up something if we're not sure, and we'll talk about it. The third rule is this is all for friendly conversation. People from different beliefs, different backgrounds, whatever. You can come together. We can have a discussion and just say, hey, let's talk about it. And bottom line with that, don't be a dick. That's it. I mean, don't be a dick. Let's be nice. So I'm going to get right to it. I'm going to introduce my guest. It's awesome. I've been waiting for him to get on for the longest time, but he's a little bitch and he never comes on my show. And he's giving me the finger in the background, which is great. So anyway, here it is. We have Ben Radford tonight, and that's Ben Radford, even though I spelled his name wrong twice in the profile picture, which I'm very, very embarrassed about. But Ben is the deputy editor of Skeptical Inquiry Science Magazine. He's a research fellow for the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry. He's a folklorist. He's an award-winning author / co-author / editor of over 20 books. It's probably a lot more than 20 now. And thousands of articles with topics including urban legends, paranormal, critical thinking, and media literacy, which is really important. He's also a board game designer. Keep that in mind. That's right there. He's a puzzle designer. He's a film director, which I actually got to see one of his films lately. He's a science-based paranormal investigator, which is how I know him. And he's also the co-host of Squaring the Strange podcast, which is an awesome podcast. So I'm going to just bring him on. Here we go. There's Ben. What?
Hey there.
Hey, what's up, buddy?
Good to be on, man. Good to be on. This is fun.
This is good. I'm glad to have you on. This is awesome for me. Like we've done a couple shows, your show, together, which is always nice. And it's nice to actually talk shop with you because I'm gonna be all mushy here, but you are definitely one of my mentors. I've learned so much from you over the years, and it's just been like every time I call or if I have a question, you're like right there to answer. So it's been really cool, and I love having you on. And yeah, I mean, we can jump right into it. I want to say hi to everybody here. We got Linda, Stacy, Darren, Mike, Dean. Oh my goodness, we got a lot of people coming on. That's awesome. Everybody's excited to see you. So I'm going to start with some questions. We're going to get into some topics here. If you guys have questions out there for Ben, please put them in the chat room and I will get to them in between everything that's going on. Because this is a Q&A show for the audience. So I will definitely defer my questions for your questions. So with that, how you doing, Ben?
Doing good. Just super busy, and I hate to say that because it sounds like I'm bitching, but it just I'm usually busy, but I've been extraordinarily busy for the past couple of weeks. But it's and then layered on top of that, of course, we have the pandemic, and I'll just briefly acknowledge the recent bad news about the passing of Ruth Ginsburg. Which just occurred a couple hours ago. Sort of don't want to get political about it, but it's right. Want to acknowledge that. And just the 2020 has not been a good year for anybody. Even Putin is like, damn. I don't know how you say it in Russian, but he's like, yet. So he can't be loving this either. So, but I'm doing okay. Just, I'm still doing the Squaring the Strange. It's nice to be still doing that after 3 years and change, when you coming on now and then. And we've done some great stuff together, and I really enjoy that. And I have a new book coming out in a month or two, and doing shows and this, that, and the other.
I know you're busy. Like, I think I'm busy sometimes, and then when we get a chance to chat, I realize, like, holy shit, I got a lot of free time compared to you.
Well, I time management is a skill I've honed over the past 20 years. So.
It's nice to see the background of your office and how it compares to, like, the piles of stuff that I know I have that I usually push off to the side so people can't see.
Yeah, I mean, I've got, there's behind me, there's a Magritte print. I'm a huge fan of Magritte. There's Max Headroom over there, and for those who don't know, I collect clothespins, and finally because I'm like, all the things on that line are like ongoing current projects. So each one of those is something that I'm like actively doing in some form or whatever else. And I realized that if it's all on a desk, then they're laid on top of each other. But if I hang them up like a clothesline, like clothes on a line, I can stand there and just like look at it all and just feel the soul crushing weight of obligations and just start sobbing. And like over the side, I have some Kleenex. I can just reach over and dab my tears. Anyway.
I don't have clothespins. I have a whiteboard that's hung up over here, but I don't show it because it's the same thing. It's all the projects that I have in the works, and I don't want people to see it because some of the shit that we do, you don't want them knowing.
Exactly.
Until it's out. I already see people like saying, "Hey, a new book. Can you tell us anything about this new book?" Like,
yeah, it's not much of a secret. But yeah, basically it's I think my 12th, 13th book. I think 13th, depending on how you count them. And it's a collection of my Skeptic Inquirer magazine articles. Says,
oh, okay.
Well, no, I'm a columnist for SI and have been for, I don't know, 12 years, 15 years now.
Ever.
And yeah, forever. And at some point I just realized, I had this huge backlog of columns. And for those who don't know, the column that I have in SI is kind of unique for a couple of reasons. One is it's usually the shortest one. So I have a tight time space constraint. The other thing is that they're questions that are asked of me. So in some ways it's a lot like what you do, Kenny. Is because the other columnists, Joe Nickel has a column, and Massimo does, and Stuart Weiss and others, sometimes Harriet Hall, and they usually they had the freedom to pick whatever topic they want, and I do to some degree as well. But typically, I answer questions posed to me, and I investigate them and write about them as best I can under the constraints, and so. I figured, well, the last book that came out was Investigating Ghosts, which you have a couple of photos in, by the way. If anybody sees the photo of the Ouija board on page whatever of my Investigating Ghost book.
Yes.
Yes, that's Kenny Biddle and his. Oh, there you go. There you go. Yeah. Oh, I didn't see that. You got my books lined up.
I lined them up. It is a Radford party in here. I have your books lined up here. I have your board game, if anyone's interested. I have that here. I have the Buddha, the gunning Buddha, which is
badass Buddha of enforced enlightenment. Yes,
this is one of my prized possessions. It's even initialed underneath in his crotch.
Well, I knew you'd be looking there, so
yeah. And then this, you gave me this. You sent me this, a bottle of slime, in one of the packages you sent me. But yeah. That was awesome. I love doing that. When people ask me to do a little bit of work for them, I love that shit because it gets me into it and participating. And it's a
challenge and collaborations, and that's one of the things is that, and you and I have both talked about this a little bit, is that what we do is really pretty niche. I mean, it's weirdly niche, and sometimes it can be lonely because. there's not a lot of us skeptics. I mean, there's lots of ghost hunters, lots of this and the other, but the number of us that are actually bringing the critical thinking and the investigation, can fit in a mid-sized bus. And so, which is good in some ways and bad in some ways, but one thing it means is that it's very fragmented. And so that's one of the reasons I really enjoyed going to skeptical conferences like TAM and Dragon Con and whatever else, because it was a chance to sort of meet my friends who I haven't seen in forever. But of course, with the pandemic, it's sort of more fragmented and isolation than usual. But it's anyway. My point was being that that's one of the cool things about when there is a project that other skeptics are sort of involved in, like you or Susan or somebody else. If I have time, I love to join in, because I think that really it feels good to be part of something and making some sort of half-assed difference. And even though I'm usually dragging you guys down, I mean, I'm like, oh God, Raffles here. All right, this is gonna take an extra hour, but all right.
I mean, it's funny you say that, because every time I've had the opportunity, and I think I've been on Squaring the Strange like 3 or 4. I'm not sure how many times, but every time the biggest complaint I hear from Celestia is, you guys talk too fucking much. Because like we're so detail oriented, so we talk and we give a lot of detail. And I know she has her work cut out for her when she has to edit down. But really cool. I mean, all right. So I guess my first question to you, I'm waiting for people to put up questions in the comments. Feel free to put comments up or questions for Ben if you have anything about his work or what he's doing, what's coming up. But my question, how did you get into this?
You mean
like writing, investigating paranormal claims? I mean, is that where you started with with Skeptical Inquirer?
Right. Well, so that's a good question. I talked a little bit about this in my SPI, Scientific Paranormal Investigations book, but basically, the short answer is that when I grew up, because I live in Rio Rancho, New Mexico, which is just outside of Albuquerque, which of course is famous for Breaking Bad and Wile E. Coyote and that sort of stuff. But it's a small, desert town. I mean, New Mexico is mostly desert, and when I was growing up, I was and you and I are about the same age, so we had sort of the same touchstones. So you would see these TV shows, That's Incredible, and In Search Of, and see these stuff, and I'd be like fascinated, like, oh, this is so cool, this guy's doing this thing on ghosts and monsters and UFOs and stuff. And so I would go to the local used bookstore, and to this day, of course, I still love bookstores, especially used.
Yeah. Me too. Yeah, I absolutely love bookstores.
Yeah, I mean, that's and usually like when I go to, I haven't done it recently, obviously, but like if I go to a city to do a talk, someone flies me into Phoenix or Miami or wherever. The two things I say, okay, I'll do the talk for you, cover my expenses. We'll talk a little honorarium. I want to see the art museum. And I want to see the bookstore. Okay. Whatever else I'm doing there, make sure I have time to do these, because that's where I want to be. So anyway, so I when I was growing up, I would walk to my local bookstore, which is about half a mile from my house. I'd plunk down my allowance, $5-10, and I'd come home with these armloads of books, some of which I still have behind me. And just books on all, paranormal, stranger than science, blah, 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 unexplained. And I was like totally into this for probably 4 or 5 years. And gradually I'm like, but hold on. It's like, they didn't do any investigation. It's just sort of like, they're just repeating what other people said. They're not, over and over, I read these books and they're all breathless, dramatic, sensational things. I'm like, yeah, but how do you know? Because you clearly didn't do any real investigation. You're just copying what someone else did. So that sort of was a turning point for me when I was probably 14, 15, 16. I began sort of becoming disillusioned by these rafts of paranormal books that were claiming to, provide true accounts of blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you don't know that. There's no investigation. There's no mention of any details, no eyewitnesses. Right. it's all this half-assed stuff. And so that got me towards skepticism. And then I later on went to UNM, University, not much, or New Mexico, I mean, got my psychology. And I'll tell you a real quick story because it's kind of funny. But when I was an undergrad, I was in honors class, and I was examining human fallibility and technological endeavor. So I was examining the Challenger and the Chernobyl accidents in 1987, and what led to the Challenger space shuttle exploding, and what led to the meltdown in Reactor 4 at Chernobyl. And it was really interesting getting into the technology and what went into it. Anyway, I ended up writing an essay on it, and somebody submitted it to a contest, and I won. And so the prize, such as it is, was to go to Logan, Utah. And I'm not knocking Logan, Utah. It's a perfectly nice little tiny college town.
I like the disclaimer right there. I'm not knocking it, but
I'm just saying. So me and I think 3 other people from UNM in the honors program went to Logan, Utah to present our papers, our winning whatever's. In one case it's poetry, in one case it was mine. Anyway, so we land there, and it was like, I think it was like 1 or 2 nights. And we land, and you'll appreciate this part. The first thing we did is look for beer. And we didn't realize that Logan was a dry county because it's in Utah.
Oh.
So me and 4 or 5 other people from UNM they housed us in the little community thing over Logan. So we're walking around the town looking, we're not desperate for beer, but we're like, what else are we going to do for the afternoon, right? So we're wandering around, and no beer anywhere near there. I mean, we soon realized they're like, yeah, you're in the wrong place if you're looking for beer, dudes. Anyway, so while we were there, we came across a used bookstore. And it was filled with a lot of apocalypse stuff because it's Mormons in Utah, lots of, how to live in your basement for 10 years and canning. But among these, among all the books and again, this is probably like 4 PM, so they're probably going to close up anyway. Tiny little place. So I'm going there like, hey, this is cool. We're not finding any beer. Might as well spend our time somehow. So as we're going through the bookstore, I came across the very first time I'd ever seen Skeptical Inquirer magazine, and it was I don't know if I have it here or not, but it was when SI was in a small format.
The small ones, yeah. I have a whole
and there was one particular one that was on Nostradamus. And I was like, I said Nostradamus Exposed or something by James Randi. I'd never heard of Randi. I'd heard Nostradamus, but I'd never heard of Skeptical Inquirer magazine. I'm like, that's kind of interesting. And it was a back issue then. And again, this was
right.
80, or this was 92, 93 or something. So even then it was, the issue was 10, 12 years old. But it was on sale for $2 or something. So I picked it up. I'm like, yeah, what the? I had never before seen a criticism of Nostradamus. All I had seen are Nostradamus, the seer from the Middle Ages, France, blah, blah. And this is the first time I'd ever seen like, oh, hold on, this guy is criticizing Nostradamus. Like, I want to read this. I don't know who this Randy guy is. He seems nice. But I'm seeing another side to a story that I'd only heard one side to up until that point. So I bought the magazine. I actually bought a couple back issues. And then I brought it with me back here to Albuquerque, and I showed it to my dad. I was like, Dad, I saw this really cool magazine. It's called Skeptical Inquirer. Who the hell named it that? And he looked at it and he said, I think the editor lives here. I'm like, no. He's like, yeah. I'm like, no. He's like, yeah. So sure enough, I dig it. So sure enough, the editor, Ken Fraser, lives here in Albuquerque, and about 20 minutes drive from where I am. And I emailed him and I said, I saw this magazine and I see you're an editor. Are you here in Albuquerque? Can I write something for it? This is really cool. I've never seen anything like this. And 20 years later, I'm still the deputy editor of the magazine.
Nice.
Sorry if that was rambling, but that's the answer.
That's great. I mean, that's a great story. I love that. I mean, I have a whole bunch of questions, but I mean, that is, it's almost like a gateway story for me for skepticism. And this might actually address one of the questions, but I was starting to get more skeptical. I was a ghost hunter, and I had really started to get into photography, and I started realizing like a lot of the anomalies that I was picking up, and most ghost hunters were picking up, had natural explanations, and that evolved into a small book, like a booklet kind of thing, which I believe
I happen to have on my shelf. I think so.
I think so. I think I don't know if I sent it to you or if
say one fell off a truck and I got a hold of one.
I think my friends Andy and Tanya Kaiser,
yeah.
I think they sent it to you.
I think so, yeah.
Yes, to look at. And I actually got a response from you. And that was like pretty much my turning point. Like, holy shit, like this guy, I've read your work. I'd never talked to you before, and you were giving me feedback, which was positive feedback, and that set me on more of a downhill slope into skepticism, which was a positive.
I'm always gratified to hear that. I appreciate that.
It was very cool because I tell the story, and I really want to get to some of these questions, but I tell the story often when I'm asked about my switch to skepticism. And I try to model how I approach people the way you and like, how you approached me, because you didn't come at me as like, no, idiot, this is stupid. Don't do this. You have no idea what you're doing. You actually gave me good, positive, kind feedback. And it was more of a discussion, which is why I do the show the way I do it. Because it was more, we were talking, and you weren't criticizing me in a harsh way. You were giving me help. So I always took that to heart and said, this is the way I want to do it. I don't want to be a dick to people. I want to help, and that's the way.
And as you know, I'm sort of, one of the things I'm known for among many is the good and bad is being diplomatic. And that's, there's lots of, I'm not going to name too many names, but there are some high profile skeptics that are just coarse.
Yes.
And that's fine. Penn and Teller, they have their own way. And, then you have the mentalists, you have Banchek and Jamie and Swiss and all that's well and good. It's a big tent with lots of opportunities for everybody to do their own thing.
Yeah.
But partly in my experience, and partly, as you saw, is like, I realized pretty quickly that if you treat people with respect, you'll oftentimes get that back, and that opens dialogue. And it doesn't mean that one or the other of you is totally wrong. It just means that, if you're obnoxious, number one, you're not going to come off well. Number two, you're not going to help them.
Right.
And so, you have to figure out what's your goal. Is your goal to be a know-it-all asshole, or is your goal to help somebody understand what's going on?
Exactly. All right, I'm gonna stop telling stories. I'm gonna get to some of these questions. First and foremost, Mike wants to know what you're drinking, which is an important question here at the bar.
Clearly, yes. I am drinking a Foster's, actually, a Foster's oil can.
I love Foster's.
I am a fan of Foster's. I don't drink as much as I should, but on the occasion that so in this case, it's Foster's. I tend to like lagers and stuff like that. I'm not big on the bitter beers. There's not bitterness in my life, so.
I hear you. Our friend Susan is on. That's great. Nice to see you, Susan. She wants to know, where did you get the shirt of number 6?
Ah, yes, the prisoner. Yes, this is my prisoner shirt that says "Be Seeing You," which is for those who haven't seen The Prisoner, it's one of my all-time favorite TV shows, along with Max Headroom and probably Animaniacs and a couple others. I got this shirt actually from a friend of mine, Chris Ailes, and Chris has been my friend for, I don't know, longer than I can care to remember, and he's accompanied me on a couple of my investigations. So if you've read my Tracking the Chupacabra book, there's a reference to Chris. He was with me in the jungles of Nicaragua looking for the Chupacabra. So anyway, that's cool. That's a gift from my friend Chris.
Very cool. Stacy has a question actually for me, but she says, what made you become a skeptic? Because I know from old interviews that you were a believer. So I touched on that pretty good in the last couple minutes. But yeah, I mean, I guess photography was my biggest gateway into skepticism, because the more I learned, the more I became familiar with photography and how light interacts with film and the digital sensor, with lenses, with everything else. I started realizing, like, this shit ain't real. This shit ain't, it's not ghosts. It's not UFOs. It's not Bigfoot or any kind of creatures. I can figure out what's going on. That's not for everything, but for the most part, that was really got me thinking. And that got me writing the little booklet called Orbs or Dust, which is no longer in print because I printed everything myself. I literally printed everything, me and a couple friends, and we like put them together and stapled them and everything, and that's how they went out. But I am still working on the updated version because you keep bugging me, and I keep
telling you, Kenny. It's like, come on, man. It's like you do these great investigations. You do stuff that I'm like, oh, I wish I had done that. And then I'm like, Kenny, you got to publish this stuff. It's like, yeah, it's online, it's in the magazine. But I'm telling you, get a book out. I'll help you write it. I'll do the forward or something. But I'm just do whatever you want. I'll do it anyway. So.
Oh, all right. Let's see what else we got. Oh, Dan Sid's. She keeps your book next to Flim Flam.
Oh,
that's cool.
Thank you.
I got. Yeah, Flim Flam is right behind him. Let's see what else.
Please be in that company.
I love these books. Let's see. Darren says, did you guys grow up watching In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy, Kenny or Ben? Bien.
Well, at least he spelled my name right, unlike some.
Fuck you.
Yes, I did grow up in Search Of. I was not. Ironically, I wasn't a huge fan. I mean, I wasn't like, I need to see every episode, but I did see it when it first came out, of course. And I'll just, a quick aside here. I had, at one point, I had talked to Derek Colanduno, who I co-founded the Skeptics track at Dragon Con. And I said, Derek, is there any way, let's do something different. And so he pitched the idea of to Leonard Nimoy's people of having him do a presentation on the Skeptics track. And he said he got a really good response because everyone wants to know about Star Trek. And it was like, he's like, oh, someone wants to talk about something other than Spock. I'm like, yes, let's talk about In Search Of. And so Derek got back to me. He's like, yeah, I mean, they seem open to it, and it all fell through, unfortunately. But at one point, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, there was a slim chance that I could have been on a panel with Nimoy. But
that would have been nice. Yeah, I grew up watching it because that was pretty much what we did. Like growing up, we didn't have the internet. The story you're told about, looking for beer or just going up and going to the local bookstore. That's what we did. So like
back in my day,
oh my God, I feel old now.
Light had just come online and everybody gathered around it, warming our hands.
We still read by candlelight. Kidding me. But yeah, I used to watch it, and I kept thinking like, wow, these places, I wish I could go to these places. I want to go to these places. And that was part of the driving force. Like I've always been interested in it. And, and when I got to be a grown up, I could go to them places. And then I was disappointed with most of them. Mike says, following on Stacy's question, what science background, if any, did Ben have prior to his career as a skeptic?
Oh, that's a very good question. Thank you, Mike. There's a couple answers. My background, again, my academic background is, excuse me, the Fosters was talking for me.
Wow.
My academic background, as I mentioned, I have a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's degree in education, focusing on science. and science education specifically. But in terms of becoming a skeptic, I don't and have never claimed to have a strong hard sciences background. I mean, when I was an undergrad, I took courses in some of the sciences. I had geography and physics and some of the basics. Sort of the undergrad stuff. But it was really through my interest in science that sort of I was learning about control groups and the scientific process and whatever else. And that stuff is pretty basic. That stuff is pretty fundamental to all the physical sciences. So the things that have really I think formed my approach are a couple things. Number one is psychology, as I mentioned, because psychology really underlies a lot of skeptical investigation, primarily because there isn't hard evidence. So it's, the problem is not that we have hard evidence of ghosts or Bigfoot and science can't figure out how to process the evidence. That's not the problem. The problem is we don't have good evidence of Bigfoot. We don't have good evidence of ghosts. We don't have the missing piece is not the forensic ability to evaluate these things. So once you recognize that the bulk of the evidence is not hard evidence, it's nothing really actionable, then the question comes to be, well, it's experiences, right? We don't have good evidence, hard evidence of ghosts. We have lots of people with experiences of ghosts. We don't have good hard evidence of Bigfoot and so on. We have people talking about their experiences. And of course, when you talk about experiences, that's psychology. It's memory, it's perception, it's recall, it's biases. And so that psychology really, I think, in my opinion, really sort of helped form the basis for a lot of the investigation stuff. And then the other prong would be journalism. And both my grandparents were journalists, and my dad's a journalist to this day, a small independent journalist. And so I also come from a background of journalism and investigative journalism. And then more recent to the mix was folklore. And as Kenny's talked about on the show before, and I have as well, particularly when you're talking about ghosts, a lot of ghost lore ghost reports is folklore. If you go back and look at what are people reporting and look at how did the Victorians think of ghosts, and so much of it is legends and lore and folklore and stuff, and so those three things sort of come together. So that's sort of my background in terms of the investigation side of things.
So when you got your first issue of Skeptical Inquirer and you read it and you were all excited and you contacted Ken, did you have any background then?
At that point, that would have been okay. Yeah. So I had because that happened just before I graduated, obviously, because I was still in. So at that point, I was getting my bachelor's in psychology.
Okay, very cool.
Yeah,
it's funny because I get that question a lot, and I don't have a science background. My background is in repair technology, like whether it's cars, diesel, trucks, various equipment, aircraft. I've worked on all these. I've been trained on all these. So when I break it down, I usually say, hey, my entire career has been training for figuring out a problem. Like that's my training, to look at something, to diagnose it, to figure out what's wrong and then fix it. So that's how I approach all my investigations. And I think that's why it's so detailed, because I break everything apart to look to see what's wrong, what's causing this.
And it's essentially a scientific process, right? There's something there. There is a mechanism. There's something that's supposed to do something. It's not doing whatever the hell it's supposed to do. Therefore, something is broken. So you take it apart and figure out, okay, well, this works, and it's a matter of, as you talked about before, it's a matter of tracking down the problem. Let me just add one other quick thing, which is that I sort of see what we do as filling the gap between the scientists and the public. Because the fact is that for the most part, there are a couple exceptions, but for the most part, the scientists, the hardcore busy scientists, they're doing other work. They're not spending their time addressing Bigfoot claims. They're not spending their time looking into the psychology of ghost reports. It's not that they necessarily think they're too stupid to do. They're just doing more important things. And so I think that the skeptics community helps to bridge that. So there's always been this gulf between the knowledgeable experts and the scientists and what the public thinks about X, Y, or Z, about whether it's vaccinations or whether it's the harmful effects of cell phones or whatever the hell it is. And so particularly for things like alt med, I think that's an important role, because otherwise a lot of the high profile scientists, they're busy doing other things. So that's where that's where I think we sometimes fill the gap.
I agree. I mean, we do the work and I don't want to say dumb it down, but sometimes it's more like when I read papers, when I read academic papers, it's very, very, it's difficult. It's difficult for me to understand sometimes. And I really spend a lot of time going through terms and trying to understand them better. And then I try to take that information and make it more plain.
Right.
So that it's easy to understand for me, not, because I'm not that smart. So I need it to be dumbed down for me.
Well, but you also do that in your investigations, right? I mean, this is like when you're looking up the Dybbuk box or debunking Zach Bagans' rampant plagiarism, whatever that is and that's part of the process. That's one reason why I always encourage skeptics generally, and you specifically, to write about it, because it gives you practice in translating what you discovered, what you uncovered, what you figured out. Something that isn't obvious to the average person looking at it, and you're like, holy shit, this is what this is. This is where this came from. This traces back to this. This part of the story is false. And the important part is then it's enough. It's enough. It's not enough for you to know that. It's not enough for you to have figured it out. In order for it to be useful to the general public and to other skeptics, you have to write about it. You have to tell people, this is what the mystery was. This is how the process came about. This is what the answer is, so that we can learn from you. But if it's just in your head, then unfortunately, we're not psychic.
It's not. No one is. All right. That's awesome. We got a question from JD Seward. Oh, this is almost covering us up. Do you think critical thinking and scientific paranormal investigation is gaining ground with the number of books, articles, podcasts, etc., are out there today, in addition to Skeptical Inquirer, or are science advocates and skeptics still outnumbered by the books, TV shows, etc., that push uncritical belief? Ooh.
Well, you answer first, so I can decide whether I agree with you or not.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so I think this. See, I don't have any actual numbers to go off of, and I think this would be more of an objective kind of answer if we actually had stats for like book sales and viewership and stuff like that. But from my perspective, I'm totally on the other side of it, where I collect science books. I mean, this entire bookcase back here is nothing but science and critical thinking and more of a skeptical nature. Not skeptic books per se, but science and logic and reason and good investigation. So I actually look for that more, and I would spend money, like good money. I would pay cover price for those books, as opposed to like ghost hunting books where it's like Ghost Hunting 101. No, I would wait until that's on the bargain shelf and then buy it for $1.
And then you'll see that Zach Bagans plagiarized it anyway. So
yes, yeah.
Oh, did I bring that up again? Sorry.
Oh, don't worry. I'll tell you later about.
Here's what I would say. I would say that I think that, and I'm generally a glasses half full kind of guy, optimist by nature, and I think that critical thinking and skepticism are gaining ground. We're still outnumbered. I mean, don't get me wrong, but the fact that there is a body of work that is published in SI, that's published in bookshelves. I mean, I got some behind me, so does Kenny, right? Is that, you know, I'll tell you this: when I was a kid, when I was in my teens, I don't think there was a book like that. I mean, there was. I mean, I'm not saying that you and I and Joe Nickel and Randy invented skeptical books, but I'm just saying that in terms of, like, you know, being able to find these things online and books or whatever else. And so, you know, because that, I guess what my point would be that I think the ratio of bullshit is still, you know, 90-10.
Yeah.
But it's improving, right? And because, you know, look at it this way. Let's say you have a 6-year-old kid, a 6-year-old daughter or son or whatever else, and you want to get them engaged in skepticism and critical thinking, right? I can list you off the top of my head a dozen books that would be great for that. And if you had asked somebody that in 1980 or 1975, I don't know what they would have said. Right. And so I think that I think we are, you know, again, gaining ground. It's like they keep piling it on. You keep climbing up the hill there. But,
and I also see a shift because I do interact a lot with the paranormal community, which, when I say that, it encompasses everyone that, like, looks for ghosts or UFOs or cryptids or something like that. I interact with them enough that I've seen a shift in attitude. It's not automatically, let me believe everything. I mean, granted, yes, there's still a ton of people that are like that, but sure, there are more and more people that I find that will approach me or somebody else and just say, hey, you know, I saw this. What's your take on it? What do you think it is?
Right.
You know, so they're not, I don't think the vast majority are just accepting things at face value anymore. I think there's a growing number that are seeking out, like, hey, let me second guess this now. You know, there's enough information out that I know that maybe we should question this, and maybe I don't know enough about this and I should ask somebody else.
Yeah, and you know, not just books. I mean, you know, keep in mind, I mean, podcasts are a great example, right? I mean, you got FBU, got Squaring the Strange. You know, I Want a Parsec, along with Blake and Karen for Monster Talk 100 years ago. I mean, there's more people doing stuff out there than ever before, and I'm sort of a hothouse flower in that, you know, I just sort of stumbled upon one of the main organized skeptical groups in modern America, and I'm not bragging. It just is. I mean,
right.
Psychop is basically. I mean, there's Sherman, there's the Skeptic Society, and there's the now defunct JREF and whatever else. But I mean, Psychop and CFI have been the flagship for 30 years now. Yeah. And I just sort of happened to come on, sort of, you know, at that time, and, you know, worked for Paul Kurtz and worked with Joe and others as well. And so it's a little weird sort of being part of that, but also, you know, we have high profile people that are contributing. We've got, you know, Bill Nye and Neil Tyson, and just, you know, it's just people who are all sort of pitching in some way, and, you know, and we're making some progress.
Awesome. All right, we got some other people here. Let's see. Oh, Darren says, once you resort to name calling and insults, your argument is moot. I mean, I don't necessarily think your argument is moot, but it makes people stop listening to you if you start name calling, and that's one thing I really. It really takes a lot for me anymore to just be like, you know what, dude, shut the fuck up. It really takes a lot for me, because I've learned to not be so combative, but yeah, once in a while it happens. But yeah, name calling, insults, don't do it. It's much easier to be nicer to people. And like, oh, Mick West. Hey, Mick. It's good to see you. He says, don't be a dick, which is good.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then Susan says, unless your name is Richard. That's nice.
In which case, and Mick is another good example. I mean, I love Mick's work. He's done amazing stuff on, on everything from conspiracy theories to debunking UFO videos. And it's people like Susan and Rick and Mick and Richard. I was getting confused with Richard, but Saunders and I really I don't want to get all mushy here because I still got half the sponsors, but I really do feel a real kinship to this group, just because we're a small group. We look out for each other for the most part. I'm proud to call a lot of these people my friends.
Oh, that's sweet. Yeah, it's nice. I mean, I like going to some of the conferences, and one of the things that I do encourage people to do, because I do kind of, I don't know if this is like, patting myself on the back here, but I try to be the bridge between like a paranormal community and more of a skeptical community, because it's like I try to go not both ways, but I try to say, hey, let's talk about these ideas. And I encourage people to go to different conferences. So, because most of the time when I go to like paranormal themed conferences, it's always paranormal people.
Right.
It's hardly ever skeptics, scientists, people like us that go. Hardly ever. And then on the flip side, it's the same way. I hardly ever see believers, like diehard believers, attend a science conference. And I'm constantly saying, hey, go, because you get to meet people. I got to meet Mick West at SciCon, which was awesome. I mean, it was an embarrassing story too, because I actually like used his work, and I was sitting next to him, talking to him, not realizing it was him. I felt so stupid because I got pretty drunk. I mean, surprise. And then it finally, the light bulb went
you're Mick.
Holy fuck, West. And like, you're an idiot.
No, but I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that's actually one of my core frustrations. Is that there isn't more dialogue. There isn't more dialogue between skeptics and believers. There isn't more dialogue there, and I find it very frustrating. And I find it, unfortunately, it's oftentimes, of course, the believers that don't want to deal with the skeptics. I mean, I've been the token skeptic on a bunch of TV shows and conferences, Bigfoot conferences, whatever else, and I don't mind. I don't. Well, aren't you afraid of getting hostile? No, let's talk about this. Like, I'll be respectful and be respectful back to me. And I think that's one of the things that I really appreciate you doing, Kenny, is and Susan as well. Particularly Susan with the Wikipedia project. It helps to really bridge that gap, and we're all trying to do this bridging thing. And I remember one time going back to DragonCon for a second. Talking to Derek, and we were trying to. I wanted to have a panel with me and the ghost hunters, Jason and what's his face, the guy that faked us. Anyway,
great.
Right? I mean, it's like, and so seriously, I was like, Derek, let's do this. I mean, This is not a trap. This is not a gotcha. I would find it interesting. The audience would find it interesting. Get a couple skeptics up there. Get these TV ghost hunters up there. Let's just have a talk. No name calling. Just,
right.
What do you think about these methods? Why do you think this is true? Why do you think this isn't? I think Derek talked to his people, and then it was a go, and then it all fell apart and scheduling conflicts. Right. But I'll tell you one quick success story is Patrick Burns.
Yes.
Another example, I met Patrick at I think it was DragonCon, and he's a ghost hunter. He's done TV stuff, and he and I had this sort of friendly rivalry for a couple of years, and then I remember one time I was giving a talk on ghost hunting, and I mentioned Patrick, and I realized he was in the audience. I'm like, oh shit! I mean, I wasn't saying anything bad about him. We're just like, oh okay, but he's just a really cool guy, and he's more of a believer than I am, and I'm more of a skeptic, but we're good friends, and he's cool. So there are there's a lot of opportunity if people reach out, and I always that's one of my real frustrations is that there isn't more dialogue.
And I mean, it's important. I mean, how are you going to progress if you don't go outside of your circle?
Exactly.
If you're just going to stay at your own kind of thing, you're preaching to the choir, which already preach the same shit you're preaching. It's just going to go round and round chasing your own tail. You're not progressing. You're not learning anything new. But I love that kind of stuff. Anytime that I know that there's a paranormal conference going on, I always try to attend. And if there's a panel discussion, I'm emailing the organizers like, hey, any chance you looking for a token skeptic? I'm your man. I'll do it. I'll totally do it. I have no problem.
Token skeptic? Tell me.
I do have a shirt. I do have a shirt that says that. Yes. But I've done talks for a group of psychics. It was like a monthly club where there was like 25 to 30, and it was all women psychics that invited me to come talk. And it was like, most people were like, are you crazy? What are you doing? I was like, why not? They asked me, they want to talk.
Reaction.
Maybe they want to, pick my brain. Maybe they want to talk about stuff, or, if they want to stump the skeptic. I mean, I'll play that game too, but I'm not going to just say no, because what does that do?
Right.
Nothing. So, let's see what else we got. Oh, Carol's got a funny question here. Is writing for SI and books your only job? Do you have a day job like Kenny? Do you have a day job, Ben?
Do I have a day job? That's actually a good question. It is a little odd. So the answer to the question is that, strictly speaking, my official capital D, capital J, my day job is as deputy editor for Skeptic Inquirer magazine. So that's, strictly speaking, that is the bulk of what I'm literally paid to do, is copy editing, going back and forth with authors, including difficult authors like Kenny, people who can't write. It's
like me.
All those sorts of things. So a lot of it is copy editing. It's going back and forth, and I mean, I enjoy it. I mean, I'm an editor by trade. So that's probably the bulk of my official job. And then I also wear the other hat of I'm also a research fellow at the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry. So in that capacity, I do talks, I do presentations, I sometimes do investigations. Joe Nickel is a senior research fellow there. I'm along with, I think, Richard Wiseman and a couple others. So I do that. So part of my job is media outreach, and so that's why when I'm doing a TV show or overall, it's that sort of part of that job. Okay. And then the other part is the sort of going further away is, like, for example, doing the books and things, right? So the books that I write, they're not on behalf of the Center for Inquiry. They're my own books. They're my own work. I own the copyright on them. Whatever else. They're not work for hire. In some cases, it sort of blends, right? Because by what I do, I'm sort of doing skepticism and stuff. So the corollary to that is that a fair number of, I would say most of the investigations I do are on my own time and on my own dime. So there are some examples of where I'm kind of being paid on a daily, paid my salary to do investigations. But for most of them, they're done on weekends, on nights. They're really my own passion. So that's part of the answer.
I get it. I mean, I'm my day job is not actually during the day. Like, mine splits right in the middle of the day and night, but same way. Like, in the morning, I have another job that I do. At night, when I come home, I have another job that I do. And then everything else, all this, the investigations I do, the devices that I take apart to the very very what that pisses people off when I do it because they tell me I can't and I do it anyway. That's on my own.
The inside of my device. That's copyrighted.
Fuck you.
Kenny sent me that about a month ago. He's like, "Is there any legitimacy to this?" And I'm rolling on the floor laughing. I'm like, "That's her hurting." I'm like,
"Oh my god, fucking people." I want to put this comment up. Thanks, Shane. Zach Baggins is a joke. I agree. Correct. Like there's no leaning either side. That is correct.
Correct.
Funny thing, I guess it's getting I think times are getting tough in Vegas because I recently heard that he opened his museum up to ghost investigations. And I think I might be wrong, but I think it was $200 a person to investigate his crappy, not haunted museum. What a joke.
Cracks and hard times, man. I mean, you got to get the dude bro hair that costs money. Come on, man.
All that product. Bob's got a question. If this question was already asked, I apologize. What do you respect most in the paranormal field?
Who? Nothing.
What? Nothing?
No. You misread his fucking questions. It says who, not what.
Oh, who do you? Okay, I'm sorry.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Well, you are my editor, so shut up.
Yeah.
Have another beer.
I paid enough for that.
Who do you respect most in the paranormal field?
Well, I mean, in my case, it would probably be a tie between Randy and Joe Nickel, just because they've both put in the time. I mean, they both have their faults. I mean, as we all do. I got tons myself. But in terms of people who have dedicated literally decades of their lives to trying to do this sort of investigative work, I would say those guys. Although again, it's a hard question to answer because they're doing different stuff. Like the stuff, Susan Gerbic does amazing work that is outside my field. I mean, the stuff that the Girl Skeptics on Wikipedia is doing, it's vitally important and it's really good. But it's not what I do. It's a very sort of niche but important thing. And so, Massimo Polidoro, Stuart Weiss, Alcock. I mean, the list goes on. But those are, if you're gonna do that now, I will add one other person, even though he's not really in the paranormal field specifically, which is Leo Igwe. Leo Igwe is a friend of mine. He works in Nigeria and he's done some amazing work fighting superstition and witch hunting beliefs in West Africa, Nigeria specifically. And I am so proud of him. And he's out there. He's helping to fight literally people that to this day, within the past month, are being accused of witchcraft in modern day Nigeria in 2020, in some cases being set on fire and attacked and harassed. And I have nothing but respect for him doing that. It's one thing for us Western skeptics to sort of sit back and talk about this and that. He lives there and he's dealing with all sorts of political pressures and witchcraft beliefs and whatever else. So I want to send a shout out to Leo.
Awesome. I do believe he was he on your show? I think he was on Scoring the Strange, right?
He was on Scoring the Strange. He was also on the Skeptics track at Dragon Con with Jamie and Swiss. He did a show there.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, it's interesting in a bad way because it's just what's going on, what he has to fight is just it's horrible. Hearing the details and hearing him explain everything. I mean, if you guys are interested, please look up that episode of Scoring the Strange and listen to it. I think you kind of touched on it here, like in the States, like we have no idea the kind of shit that goes on in these other places. And I remember the details.
The name of his organization is Advocacy for Alleged Witches Nigeria, AFAW, Advocacy for Alleged Witches. it's a great organization, and if anybody wants to send them a couple bucks, that would
help. Yeah,
just throw it out there.
All right, so this is a statement plus a question here. I'll try and read it right this time.
Look at that doggy.
Tracy.
Oh.
Tracy says, I get being skeptical, but my personal experiences, although I cannot prove them, make me a believer in the afterlife. There is something beyond this life. How do you prove that nothing scratched you, bit you, pushed you? I can't, but yet it happened to me so many times. So I think there's a lot to unpack there. I think there's a bias already, because to me, I'm seeing this question as in you're already a believer and you're treating these experiences as a believer, and not actually investigating what might have happened with each of these, because you're describing 3 different scenarios and you have to look to see what happened in each scenario. Scratched, bit, pushed.
Well, and keep in mind that in at least 2 of these cases, there should be hard evidence of that, right? If you're actually scratched, not just feeling a scratch, which is different than seeing a scratch, or you're seeing a bite. I mean, that's a perfect example. I mean, there is sometimes criticized, but nevertheless legitimate area of bite marks. And I mean, there are people who study
look at that,
from serial killers and assaults and stuff. And so and I'm not joking. I'm being totally serious here. So no, I'm just talking to Tracy, right? So if you genuinely and sincerely have a bite mark, clearly a bite mark that appears on your skin after experiencing a ghost, that is interesting evidence, and send it to me. I promise you, I will look at it. I will not. I mean, I'm dead serious. If this is happening as you're claiming it is, I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying that if you're experiencing something and you genuinely do feel a scratch, and a scratch appears, photograph it, document it. A bite mark, right? If this happens through an invisible ghost and it happens repeatedly, you could get a video camera and set up and have videos on you. And if a bite mark literally does appear on your neck or on your arm or something on camera, that sincerely would be compelling evidence for something weird going on.
Right. I would also add that if you're going to take pictures of it, make sure you have something for size reference, a ruler, something there, tape measure, because I always carry a tape measure always in my bag, but put it next to it so that you can get a size comparison. But yeah, take pictures and reach out, because
I mean, you say, how do you prove that nothing scratched you? Well, you can't prove a negative. But again, inherent in your question, Tracy, is the presence of potentially tangible forensic evidence, bites and scratch marks. And if these things genuinely are appearing, that's evidence, and I or Kenny or other people would be happy to look at it. Yes.
And we have to consider other things where you could scratch yourself. I mean, for an example today, if you see that right there between my knuckle here, I got this today. It was a scratch. I was working in my museum. No idea what happened. Looked down. I saw a trail of blood coming down my entire hand. I'm like, what the hell? I had no idea I did it. But looking back, I did find a cause, and I was actually playing with a certain thing, and I scratched it. Didn't realize it at the time. And I see this happens a lot, especially with when you go to locations where there's a ghost hunt going on and the lights are off or very low. No one's paying attention. They're not paying attention to what they might rub up against and could scratch themselves with like furniture or some kind of wall fixture, or even themselves. When you do something like this and you scratch because you felt something like a bug or something on you, and you scratch, and then maybe an hour later you look at it and you're like, oh wow, it feels like it's burning, and you check and you got red marks. This is something to consider. I'm not saying that this is always going to be the case, but this is something that has to be considered. If something bit you, maybe it did. Again, if you're doing ghost hunts in the dark and like you're sitting around and it's an old place, chances are there might be something in there like an animal. So you might want to be careful.
And also keep in mind, just sort of parenthetically, is that, there are accounts of people finding what they consider to be unknown mysterious objects in their bodies. And so, for example, you find this with people who believe that they've been abducted by aliens. And I interviewed a guy named Roger Lear, who's now dead, but he was a podiatrist, and he claimed to have removed alien implants from people. And somehow they all got lost in the mail, and just the excuses for why they weren't available were just mind-boggling. But anyway, my point here is, and I'm being serious, my point is that he would talk about cases where even he was skeptical of this. He would say that that sometimes people would they would stub their toe, or they would get like a something in their feet. And this is particularly true of people who have diabetes, where they lose some feeling in their feet. And so it's entirely possible. In fact, I would argue it's normal for there to be unexplained or not obviously, or objects of no obvious origin that I don't remember hitting my knee. Okay, well, there's a bruise there. Just because you don't remember when you hit your knee in the last week doesn't mean that it didn't happen. It just means you didn't happen to remember it. So again, I'm not trying to discount your experiences. I'm just saying that there are conditions under which there can appear to be seemingly mysterious or spontaneous bruises or marks or bites or some sort of mark that in fact have an ordinary explanation.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's very hard, especially when under the conditions where most ghost hunts take place. It's very easy to injure oneself. So it's something to be aware of, and maybe with this talk, with answering this question, maybe going forward on the next couple of events you go to, be more mindful of what's going on around you. Pay attention. If you do bump into something, make note of it. Check it right away. Take pictures. If you get scratches or any kind of injury like that, take pictures with some kind of measuring tool, so that we can really analyze it and go back. Because that's the start of it. The investigation is just starting with that. So cool. Very cool. Let's see what else we got.
Casey.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm not going to put all these up, but they're talking about Zach Baggins and his museum, and I like this comment. 200. Fuck him. Thank you, Stacy.
Stacy's on it. Yeah.
That made my night. All right. And another one. Troy Taylor is a joke. I agree. Plagiarism. We could talk about that later, but let's see. Shane says, I use statistics to get insight from data collected in my paranormal investigation. Ben, do you as well?
Another good question. It really depends on what it is. For example, in my most recent book, Investigating Ghosts, I have a section there about there you go. He's pointing to it. I have a section there about the importance of establishing a baseline for ghost investigation. So, for example, if you believe, or you're operating on the assumption that that ghosts influence the environment in specific ways, for example, a cold spot is maybe a spirit that's sucking up energy from one area to manifest itself wherever else. Or, for example, if you believe that the ghost experiences are correlated with EMFs or heat or whatever the environmental measurement is, then the important thing to do is and this is something that is very rarely done, is you need to establish a baseline, right? You can't know what is abnormal or paranormal if you don't know what's normal. And unfortunately, a lot of times what the ghost hunters do is they'll do a lockdown. Like, oh, it's lockdown, man. We're gonna go fight the ghost, man. We're gonna go there. We're gonna be on there. We're gonna stay up all night. We're gonna have the cameras and this whole thing, right? And so they and a lot of amateur ghost hunting groups do this as well, where they will go to a supposedly haunted location, and they will measure the temperature, EMFs, magnetic fields, whatever the hell it is, for 3 hours, 6 hours, overnight, or whatever else. And while they're there, they'll look around for ghosts, and they'll see, well, was there some sort of correlation between some ghosts? For example, some say, well, at 2:50 in the morning, Richard saw some sort of weird thing in the hallway, and let's go back and let's see, was there any magnetic anomaly at 2:50 in the morning? The problem with that is that they haven't done enough work to establish the baseline. It could be that every 2:50 in the morning, for whatever reason, maybe a generator starts up from the kitchen downstairs. I don't know. But in order to get a valid baseline, you need to get measurements for whatever you think may be correlated with ghosts for days or weeks or months. And in order to again, you need to know what the baseline is in order to know what is anomalous. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, ghost hunters don't want to do that. Why? Because it's boring. Because it takes weeks and months, and because in most haunted places, they want you to come to your ghost hunt and pay us our money and go away. So they're not interested in doing a long enough measurement period in which you would gather statistics for ghost investigations, which is really what you would need in order to do that. And so to get to your question with statistics, it really depends on what's being measured. I haven't found compelling evidence, for example, that ghosts are correlated with phases of the moon or with EMFs or whatever. And again, I talk about this in my book. So it would depend on what my hypothesis is. I've done some statistical analyses, but again, it really just depends on the specific case and what's being claimed about it.
Right. That's something I preach all the time. Where I see groups go into a location one time, and they're there for like 4 or 5 hours maybe, and every little spike or dip or something they're claiming is, wow, this is something. And it's like the basic idea is you really have no fucking clue what the normal thing is. None. So all of this alleged data is useless as a one shot. You really, as you said, you need to be there for days or months or weeks in order to establish some kind of normal baseline. So, yeah, I get it. Good question, though. Thank you, Shane. I appreciate that. Let's see. Stacy says, unfortunately, you can't make this stuff appear when you want it to. Well, of course, it just doesn't. Ghosts, if they exist, they don't do anything on command. So we get that because I'm constantly, even if I can get some kind of testable claim when people say something happens at a certain time, it doesn't. I don't know if it's my skeptic aura. I don't know, my skeptical shield that comes up, but it never happens.
And I mean, Stacey's exactly correct, but I want to highlight the fact that many TV ghost hunters and amateur ghost hunters as well would their methodology runs counter to this, right? Because they will, for example, do the provocations, right? They'll say, well, if I just insult the ghost, if I just yell at an empty room and say, well, you're not a strong enough ghost or whatever. So, I mean, a lot of ghost hunters, their part of their premise is literally that you can make these things appear when you want them to, or at least you have a better chance to, right? Is the idea. I mean, that's the basis of what they're trying to do. That's why they're on camera wandering around rooms saying, is there someone named Mary here? Were you killed? Tell us more about it. The premise of that, the reason they're doing that is they believe on some level that asking a spirit or an empty room or whatever the hell it is to give us a sign. Well, when you say give us a sign, what they mean is they're expecting something to happen, a knock, a weird sound, a light, a flying clock, whatever the hell it is. And so you're exactly right that they don't just appear when you want them to. Tell that to the ghost hunters, because that assumption that they do or they would underlies a lot of their flawed methodologies.
Because anything becomes a sign. I mean, anything.
Right.
Because you're right. When you ask for a sign, give us a sign that you're here, that opens it up to anything. A sound, a vibration, a knock, a light passing somewhere in the room.
I'll tell you one story. I was doing an investigation in Fort George in St. Catharines, Ontario. And it was for a TV show that, of course, never got picked up. But it was like it was a 2-3 day shoot. It was a pretty extensive thing. And at one point I was anyway, it's this old soldiers barracks. So it's an old fort. It's been since rebuilt. I mean, it's little or nothing is the original, of course, because it's very old. But we're in these barracks, and it was like near like Thanksgiving. And this is Buffalo, right? This is north of Buffalo. So this is cold as hell. And we're all in this room, and there's a TV crew there, and I'm there with the psychics and ghost hunters, and they did that. They're like, give us a sign, and and I'm just sitting back watching the whole thing, taking notes, and you're like, give us a sign, and we're waiting, and then because Fort George, it's actually pretty near the town of St. Catharines. Which is just nearby, and there's city streets that are like 4 blocks away. So we're sitting there, and like they're all waiting for some dramatic thing, and there's a car alarm. Like, I'm like, that's not a sign. You're like, no, that's like a 92 Ford. So they're fine. Anyway.
Oh, Carol wants to know, have you or anyone developed a critical thinking training course for teachers, for credit, etc., or has or high school or a college course, anything like that online? I don't know. I usually take like little not courses, but I read papers, I read whatever is out there on critical thinking.
Did you get in cryptozoology today?
I did. Yes, I got my certificate of excellence because I correctly identified several cryptids that appeared one each day in my office at work. That
wow.
I don't know where they came from, and but I do. But
I have not developed a critical thinking training course. I have had several of my books, or at least 2 of my books that I know of, and some of my materials used in college courses. I can think of 2 or 3 off the top of my head. So there are college professors and educators who use my materials for critical thinking, partly because a lot of it does involve weird topics, right? And so they realize that these are college kids, made out of high school. If you want to talk to them about science, make it sexy, make it interesting, right? Don't go out into control groups and blah blah blah. Let's talk about how to critically think, how to approach these topics, Bigfoot and ghosts skeptically. So I at one point years ago, I had an idea to create like an online investigation academy. That all fell through, but anyway.
Yeah. I thought about it. I've actually thought about doing something because I was asked maybe a year or 2 ago if I would actually go out and talk to kids at school, and we're talking like 3rd or 4th grade, and I was like, I don't think I'm qualified to do that, and I have no idea where to start. And I actually spoke to a few people that I knew around here. Like, is there any critical thinking programs for kids? Because I think that's where we need to get. We need to get them when they're young, and get in there. But I have not come across anything specifically for younger kids, and that's a project that's always been in the back of my mind to try to get going. But I don't have.
Maybe someday we can do it. I mean, that'd be a fun thing to collaborate on.
All right. Next, Bob says, or he asks, would you ever consider producing a skeptical show? We're trying to get Kenny and other members of the Three Tortured Souls, which is another podcast I do Saturday nights, to do a Netflix or Amazon Prime show on skepticism. Oh, Bob. So would you ever consider producing a skeptical show?
Would I? Honestly, I don't. I don't know that I would have the time to do it. I mean, if I'd be happy to consult with it.
Right.
You know, again, to be honest, I mean, I'm. Most of what I do is, in terms of media stuff, is on other shows.
Right.
Is on, cable channels and CW or else. And so part of the reason I do that is because, again, it's reaching beyond the audience. It's not just a skeptical crowd. It's, it's like somebody who's never heard a skeptical point of view is suddenly seeing me on their show talking about something. And so that's sort of been what I do. I haven't really had the time or interest in doing TV, having been on the other side of the camera. It's a hell of a lot of work. It is a shit ton of work. It's not easy at all. There's just so much work that goes in behind the scenes to cutting together, a 52-minute piece. And I have nothing but respect for the skeptical shows. And so, if somebody were to put together a skeptical show, I'd be happy to look into being on it. But right. I don't really. I mean, I know TV people of routes and documentarians, but I don't feel that I have the qualifications or the time to sort of, be behind it.
Right. It's a lot of. I know from personal experience, it's a lot of work just to do some kind of production like that. When we're talking about like Amazon Prime is more of a fancier YouTube to get videos on. I mean, anybody can actually do it. And I mean, when you start going through, especially paranormal categories, there's a lot of shit on there where it's like, this is a series? Are you kidding me? This is a joke. This is someone's basement. But Netflix, much harder. The museum that I've been working on, it's housed within a warehouse that is a production company. And the woman that I work with, Bianca, just wrapped up filming on a production, and I've seen firsthand like how much time and effort is put into it, how many people and how draining it is on everyone involved. So, I mean, I'm with you. Like, I'm happy to help and get into it that way, but to actually be behind it and pushing it, no, that's too much work. And
there are a handful of series that are already out there that do a pretty good. I mean, a lot of them are crap, and we've talked about that. But there was one there's one series, I think it was on Discovery, called, it was either Discovery or Nat Geo, called Is It Real? And it was a good series. I was on, I think, 3 or 4 episodes, including Ogopogo and a couple others, and they did a good job of bringing scientific, skeptical investigation to these topics. And so my point here is that sometimes I hear skeptics saying, well, it's never going to get picked up because there's no interest in shows, and once you make it skeptical, there's no audience, and that's bullshit. It's more of a challenge, but it can be done, and I've seen it done. So it's harder, but it just means you got to work harder.
Right. I mean, I would love to see a show like that where it's more skeptical investigators looking, not promoting like dramatic bullshit, scary cutscenes, dramatic music, just cut and dry. This is what we do, and this is how we do it from start to finish. Give you the mystery, show the middle where we're working on it, how we do it, how we research, what we do, and then I think it would be great. I mean, like a paranormal version of Forensic Files. I love Forensic Files, but I want to see like the ending. I want to see a solution, not just, we saw ghosts.
Could it be?
Oh my goodness. Oh, Tracy. Tracy comes back with, what are your thoughts when the Catholic Church deems a haunting demonic, where 3 exorcisms have been performed and didn't help? Final paperwork that I have states that it is demonic. I mean, just right off the bat, like it sounds like you're asking about a specific case where we're not familiar with it, so it's going to be much harder to give you an idea. But I guess we can go with the actual question. What are your thoughts on when the Catholic Church deems a haunting demonic?
Well, one of the first questions I would, when you're looking at Catholic theology and specifically about exorcisms, that's its own worldview, right? And so, it's sort of the question is almost like saying, well, how do you know that it's a ghost and not, a pixie or somebody, somebody who has levitation abilities doing something, right? And so, at the end of the day, the problem comes down to the fact that, I don't know what it is does not equal ghost. Right. And the fact is that most of the things that people attribute to ghosts could be a number of things. It could be levitation. It could be, the word ghost as a label for an experience, it's really vague. It's just saying that, somebody had some experience that they sort of, push into, if you're going to pick one of these 4 categories, what does this most clearly fit, right?
Right.
But that doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't mean that, it doesn't mean that what you're experiencing is a ghost. It might be, it might not be. And so my point here is that, when someone says, I guess I don't know how anybody could genuinely classify a haunting as demonic. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you can label ghosts. I mean, how many types of ghosts are there? As many as you want there to be.
Right.
I mean, it's, how in the world could you say this ghost is a demon, but this one over here, it's this, like,
right.
It's the whole thing. The whole thing is informed by a particular specific worldview, which may or may not reflect how ghosts operate.
We got Susan. Susan's chiming in saying, Kenny, mention the time you gave 2 talks to the school in Vegas. Ben, talk about how kids love the world of cryptids. So this is going back to, I guess, teaching critical thinking to kids. In Vegas, I actually had a great opportunity, and it was because of Susan, and I love her profile picture. It's just so funny. It's just so out there. But she actually organized this opportunity where the first part of it was she organized to have kids from a local school in Vegas attend the science convention that was out there, which was really, really cool. I mean, it brought the kids out of the school and brought them into the environment where they could listen to the lectures, stay there. She even gave them some money for the bookstore to get a book, which is great. But the second part of the project there was that she, with all the kids that could not get into it, because there was a lot of kids that wanted to go, but for them that couldn't make it or weren't picked because there was a certain number, she asked all the speakers or workshop speakers, whatever, if they would volunteer to go to the school. And I was part of that, which was great. I had the opportunity to speak to 2 classes where I went into the school, I took over the class. And once I told them what I did, as for this second job, this hobby, which is a full-time job on itself, it was great. The kids were really interested. And it wasn't just because of ghosts and UFOs and stuff like that. I mean, they love that. That's the hook. That's always the hook to get them in. But once I started explaining like how I went about investigating this and how I was able to figure it out, their curiosity was piqued, where they were just really into it. How did you figure this out? What did you do here? How do you know that? And it was just great. They started asking a lot of questions.
I love that. That's awesome. I was from year to year.
It was really cool. I mean, one of the big questions was, how do you tell good information from bad information? And we got into a very deep discussion about that, verifying facts and information, and not just taking things at face value. It was great. It was so good. And I had the real quick. I mean, the icing on the cake was that Rob Palmer, which is another online columnist for Skeptical Inquirer, he interviewed one of the kids at the end of the conference, and with all the questions, the last question was, hey, you know, we had some speakers out at school. What did you think of that? And the kid actually named me as the best part of it because he learned so much from me. And I was like beaming, like, wow, that is the best compliment I could ever get. So yeah, that's my story. So Ben, what's this with the kids love the world of cryptids?
Oh yeah, well, it sort of follows along what you're saying, is that you know, on occasion I've given talks to school kids and high schoolers, and I usually begin talking about critical thinking with cryptids, because, as I said, it's, you know, what 12-year-old doesn't love Bigfoot? I mean, it's like dinosaurs, Bigfoot, you know, Mothman. I mean, lake monsters. I mean, there's nobody in the entire class that either hasn't heard about Bigfoot or doesn't have some germ of an interest in it. And so that's when, you know, I'll begin to talk by saying, okay, you guys, you know, we're going to talk about critical thinking in science. You know, let's talk about Bigfoot. And the kid's like, what? Like, yeah. It's like, why are you talking about Bigfoot? It's like, well, I don't know if Bigfoot exists. I doubt it. But if it does exist, then there are ways to find that out. This is not unknowable. It's not, you know, it's not beyond science, as some would say. If Bigfoot are real, they're living, they're breathing, they're eating, they're pooping, they're having sex, they're doing the Bigfoot boffing, whatever you want to call it. Bigfoot. They're leaving traces, and if they're not, then they're ghost Bigfoot or something. And so when I get them thinking about that, I'm like, okay, well, there should be evidence of Bigfoot, right? Like, yeah, okay, well, there isn't. What do we make of that, right? How do we explain the fact that we don't have a Bigfoot body? How do we explain the fact you can't go to a natural history museum and see a Bigfoot bone? That doesn't prove they don't exist, to be clear, but it does raise critical thinking questions in kids. Say, okay, well, hold on here. That, you know, why is that, right? Why is it that all other animals that we know exist, there's skeletons, there's hairs, everywhere else, and then when it comes to Bigfoot, we've got blurry photos and, you know, witnesses' accounts.
Yeah. All right. Next, JD. Oh, wow. JD has a reputation for asking very detailed questions. I love this. But he says, Ben and Kenny, what are some of the best approaches to making the skeptical case regarding a claim and getting believers to hear you out? Being polite and respectful is, of course, a start, but is it helpful to phrase questions or alternative explanations as sort of harmless hypotheticals? For example, asking someone, but consider this. I'm going to let you go first.
The best approach is to getting believers to hear you out. Well, yeah, I mean, the first thing is, of course, as I said, to be diplomatic and respectful. But then I would say another corollary to that is ask questions. And that's good advice anytime, right? If you're talking, you're not learning because you're talking. So a lot of times it's really helpful in investigations and in critical thinking to shut the hell up and let them tell you their story. And whether it's somebody that claims they experienced a ghost or someone that saw a Bigfoot or else, you know, don't let them ramble on for 20 minutes about their cousin Edna's, cherry tarts, and how Bigfoot liked them. But you know, we hear them out because a lot of times they have genuine experiences. They genuinely don't don't know how to explain it.
Right.
And they're not crazy, they're not stupid, they're not lying, they had something weird happen to them, and they're coming to you to pitch it to you to say, well, what do you think about this? And oftentimes I found that if you just listen to people, just say, okay, tell me what you experienced, tell me why you think it's this. And then when you repeat back to them and they realize you weren't there, you were actually listening to them. You weren't making fun of them. You weren't sniggering. You're like, okay, let me try to understand what's going on. And that really builds empathy. And it builds a willingness to say, okay, well, he didn't laugh at me. He's like, he looks like he's genuinely trying to figure this out. And once you do that, once you bring people in on your investigation, then they're invested with you. So one thing I often do, particularly if there's some case where there's eyewitnesses and they're telling me what they experienced, whether they have documentation or not, I will frame it either explicitly or implicitly by saying, help me figure out more about this. So again, I wasn't there. You two, you three were there. I don't know. I'm just coming in here. I'm not getting paid for this. I'm genuinely here. I'm not, I'm not, this isn't I'm spending my time and energy trying to figure out what's going on. Help me figure out what's going on. Give me the details. And of course, I understand that you latched on to it being a demon or a ghost or whatever else. And I'm not saying it's not. I'm just trying to figure out, give me the basics without your interpretation on it.
Right.
And once you sort of say, help me figure this out, right? Help me to understand what's going on. Then they're sort of on the same page with you. And so you say, okay, well, I don't know. I wasn't there. Could there be other explanations? I don't know. Let's figure this out together. And sometimes I'll ask them, okay, well, can you think of any other alternative explanations? And sometimes they'll say, absolutely not. I know it's a ghost. Or sometimes they'll say, well, there was somebody else in the house, and I thought they were upstairs. And so that's what I would say.
That's awesome. And when you say that approach about help me understand this better, I've read that before. I actually had one of the journalist books, A Guide to Journalism, that I read through it. That was one of the best pieces of advice that I got from that. It's not about, hey, even if I know, if you start describing it, like your experience, and it clicks in my head, and I 100% sure I know exactly what happened, I'm not going to just blurt it out, because that's just me telling you. And then it could either have that effect of, well, you're just a know-it-all, or it could be that backfire effect thing where they're like, no, that's not it, because I already thought about it and blah, 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 blah. So it's much better to say, hey, help me understand this better. Give me more details. Listen to people. Let them talk. Like you said, that's the best thing. Don't interrupt. I can't stand, one of the things, it's probably a pet peeve. I hate when you're telling a story or you're relating an experience and you can see the other person like they're
waiting for you to stop talking so they can,
they're not listening to you anymore. They're just waiting to interrupt you so they can start talking. I don't like that. Listen to the details, and then the approach that I take, and I've learned it from these books, I've learned it from you, is just, hey, you know what? Have you considered this? Let's talk about this. What if this is a possibility? And instead of just telling someone what it is, I'd rather work through the process with them. Mm-hmm. And let's consider this. What do you think about this? Could this be a possibility? Why? Why do you think? What else is there? And it's more of an exercise for both of you to work through it rather than me just giving you the answer.
Right. I'll give you one quick example that follows up on that is, and this also happened at Fort George, which I mentioned earlier, there was a woman there that was a ghost hunter, and she was collecting, she was big on EVP and sounds and audio and blah, blah, blah. And she came up to me at the end of a long day, and she said, so I understand you're a skeptical investigator, blah, blah, blah. And she says, will you look at will you listen to my evidence? I captured something. I'd like I like your thoughts on it. I said, that's fine. What is it? She said, well, it's a child ghost. And when I said to her, I said, I will listen to your audio. I will listen to what you have to say. I will listen to it. I will try my best to hear it. But I have to ask you, and I'm, again, not being facetious. This isn't a setup. How do you know it's a child ghost? I said, I know what a human child sounds like. I don't know for sure what a ghost sounds like, and I don't really know what a child ghost would sound like. I mean, you can infer or assume that a child's voice, if you don't see an obvious source, would be a ghost, but we don't know for sure what ghosts sound like, and we sure as hell don't know for sure what ghost children sound like. And so, and again, I was very sincere. Right. I'm just being totally honest. Like, you know, you're telling me this is a ghost child's voice, and it might be. How do you know that? I mean, how could you know that? And it was interesting because and she didn't take it personally, but you could tell that she hadn't really, nobody had asked her that before. Like everyone else is like, oh, let me hear your child ghost voice, and I'm just like, well, question your assumptions a bit.
I had one. I was on a podcast a while ago, maybe like a year or two ago, and that kind of thing came up, talking about like that. That's always been one of the best questions that I always promote. How do you know that? That's one of the best questions you can ask, because it really stops. It brings a conversation to a halt, because the person giving you this extraordinary experience has to stop and think, well, how do I know that?
Right.
But during this podcast, I was talking to somebody, and there was 3 hosts, and the one host was a guy, and he said something about a ghost, like, oh, okay, how do you look at a ghost? How do you describe a ghost? Or how do you disprove ghosts? I said, well, first I need to know what you're defining a ghost as.
Right.
And for 10 minutes, we went back and forth because he couldn't get the concept of what I was asking. It's like, how do you define a ghost? Ghost is a very general term. Like, mm-hmm. Are you talking a visual thing? Are you talking like a figure? Are you talking a ball of light? Or tell me what you think a ghost is, and then we can continue with the conversation. But I don't know what you're talking about right now.
And he probably thought you were being facetious or an asshole, but you weren't. You're approaching it exactly the right way, in my opinion. I mean,
exactly. Yeah. I mean, it ended up where the rest of the show, he didn't speak to me. He literally stopped talking for the rest of the show. But I wasn't being a dick. I was trying to understand his perception, his definition of a ghost, because it might not be the same for yours or anyone else's in the chat room. Everybody has their own definition of what that is.
Right. So, and a lot of them are contradictory. I mean, and I talk about that in the book. Is like, I mean, I can name you a half dozen inherently contradictory definitions of ghosts, and they're all equally valid or invalid. I mean, and again, none of us know for sure. I mean, if we knew that ghosts existed, then we would be able to slot them into one category.
Right.
But if you don't know the characteristics of what you're trying to investigate, then how can you know whether it's present or not?
Right. These are deep questions. I mean, I guess years ago when I was in my ghost hunting phase, this is a question I would never consider. Like, I would never think about how like detailed you'd have to be, how to define something. It was always, I guess, tribal knowledge.
It's a ghost, right? It's an orb. It's glowing. Right. Obviously, it's a ghost, right?
Yeah, it's a ghost. What are you talking about? What is a ghost? It's a ghost. Everybody knows what it is.
Duh.
No, nobody fucking knows what it is. That's what it comes down to. Oh, we got a nice compliment here. Like, Aaron says, I wish I had met you and Kenny sooner before I wasted tons of money on those gadgets that definitely detect ghosts.
Yeah, good point, Aaron.
Oh my goodness. Let's say I think we're getting close. We're about 15 minutes out from the end of the show. So let me try and catch up here with any of the questions, because they're having a nice conversation in the chat room. I like that. people ask questions and people are giving a lot of input back and forth. I don't see any other questions here. No. So I think we're about caught up. Oh my God, there's so many freaking comments. Every time I click on it,
I'm really impressed with your audience because I just turned on the chat a second ago. I think it's been some good. I think we took over Kenny's show.
That's good. I love it. I love it. Oh, Carol says, we have it sounds like both of you have a huge amount of Kenny, get ready to drink energy to do so many different jobs. Wish you could bottle some for me. Thank you for doing so much. Oh, that's nice. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you, Carol.
The standard rule on this show and the other show that I do on Saturday nights is that when somebody uses the word energy in the wrong context, we drink. So, because it happens. I mean, I'm sure you've come across it. I know you've come across it. Energy is used like it's a buzzword.
Yeah.
And every time, energy. Oh, fuck.
Pure energy.
Yeah, pure. Oh my God. Now that song's going to be stuck in my head. Oh my goodness. All right. So we're getting pretty close. Why don't do you have anything coming up? You mentioned your book that you've been working on. So do you have any other projects coming up that you want to announce?
Yeah. So there's a couple things that actually just recently got slated. Celestia and Pasquale and I will be presenting for the Vegas Skeptical Society on Wednesday the 23rd, 8 p.m. So if people should check out the Vegas Society of Skeptics, I think it is. The three of us are planning to be there. And I'm also doing Richard Saunders' Skeptics in the Pub in Sydney, Australia. Not in Sydney, but at 7 p.m. Sydney time, which is fine, although it's 3 a.m. my time. But whatever. I figure, you know what? I love Richard to death. If he can fly back and forth from Australia to L.A., and the 48-hour or 72-hour 2-week flight or however the hell long it is, I can stay up until 3 a.m. and do the show. So that'll be October 1st, Thursday, and that'll be, I'll be doing a live sketching in the pub, probably talking about some ghost hunting, things like that.
Awesome, very cool. And I mean, for anyone that doesn't have this book already, I highly recommend it. Not only because I actually wrote a little section in it, free plug, full disclaimer, but it's a good book. For everyone that's out there that is into ghost hunting or anything like that, it's a really good book to give you a better insight into investigating and the methods that are much better than, like 1,000 times better than what the bullshit you see on TV. So definitely I pick it up. Just pick it up. And that's, let's see, what time is it? It's 48. So just to go through some of my announcements, I didn't play my commercial, but if you want t-shirts, I have Scientific Skepticism on Teespring. It's my science-based, skeptical-based kind of t-shirt themes, which is awesome. I love it. And all the money goes back into my research. It actually pays for other things that I do to present on the show and help keep the show going, because this shit ain't free. The events that I have, the only event that I have really scheduled is this weekend. So if you're in the Philadelphia area, come out to Norristown to Selma Mansion. I will be there tomorrow, Saturday the 19th, and then Sunday the 20th. I'll be set up in a skeptical help booth. I will be outside. I will be taking your questions, pretty much sitting there all day. If you have paranormal questions, come out, talk to me. We can do demonstrations. I'll have some things on display so you can see some testing equipment that I developed and build, so you can actually play with dowsing rods with a tester, a pendulum with a tester, which is really cool stuff. It's simple, but it's really cool. And I also have raffles going. I have 2 raffles going. Both for the museum that I do. One involves pretty much just a donation to the Cancer Research Institute, and then you get a chance to win free tickets to a VIP party for the museum grand opening.
You should definitely do that.
Definitely do that. Ben did it.
I
Ben.
did.
So we'll see who wins. I was going to announce the winners tonight, but because I'm doing a paranormal conference, I was like, fuck, extra money for cancer research. So I'm extending it throughout the whole conference while I'm there. So you can come out, you can either donate directly to the site or put $25 cash in the bin that I'll have set up. That'll go right to them and you'll get a chance to win. And then I actually have a psychic challenge coming up. I'm going to have an item on display with a backstory, but if psychics want to come up and give a backstory, if they get it correct or pretty damn close, I will give them a free ticket to the museum as well. So there you go. And with that, I think we're going to end the show. Thank you, Ben, so much for coming on. I appreciate it. I know you're a busy guy and snagging you. I gave you more than 2.5 hours notice this time.
Yeah, that was the problem last time. We're like, oh, can you do the show tonight? I'm like, dude. He's like, when is it? It's like in 90 minutes. I'm like, no.
Yeah. I know. You know what? I'm just as bit. I'm not just as busy. I'm pretty busy. And it's like the thought popped into my head. I was like, hey,
no, I appreciate it. It's just I just need lead time. But no, this has been awesome. Thanks for having me. We're gonna have you back on Squaring the Strange again. And for those who haven't seen some of the investigations that Kenny and I have done, and also Celestia, we didn't have time to talk about it today, but we did some great stuff on psychic detectives. And it's just cool stuff. So
that was a good show. I seriously, that was a 2-parter, right?
Yes, it was.
That show, yeah. So I definitely recommend looking for that because that was one of we have a couple minutes. Let's get into it a little bit. that was one of the most personal investigations I've ever been involved in because and that was your idea. So tell us a little bit about that. What sparked that?
Yeah, basically, I've done. As you guys know, I investigate a wide variety of things, but one of them, along with chupacabras and ghosts and God knows what else, is psychic detectives, and psychics generally, but specifically psychic detectives. Partly because psychic detectives, there's a specific type of psychic, and they are in some ways the most dangerous because they often exploit families. They can waste police resources by saying, "Oh, there's a missing person. Look for them here or go for them there." Or the abductor is, a 6 foot tall, white guy with a beard, whatever else. Anyway, so I've investigated dozens of psychic detective cases. I've written about a couple in my books. And one of the things that I've done a couple times was to follow cases in real time. And I did this with a famous case called, it was the disappearance of a woman in Holly Bobo. And I did this, it's been, I don't know, 8-10 years or something. And she was a Tennessee blonde girl that was abducted, and there was a big national thing and nobody could find her. And at the time, I recognized that this was a high-profile missing persons case, and I wanted to, instead of retroactively go back and find what psychics were saying, because the case was making national news, I devoted a half hour, an hour, whatever, every couple of days to documenting what psychics were saying at the time, and then I was able to compare it to what would be found, when she's eventually found. And so I had the idea to challenge Kenny and my co-host Celestia on Squaring the Strange, that the three of us would each take a then current unsolved missing persons case and track it over the course of a month or two, whatever else, until those resolutions. So I chose a case of a young boy in Ohio, and Celestia chose one. And Kenny, why don't you talk about your case?
I did. I chose something local. There was a young lady, Stephanie Pars, that went missing after she, ironically, she attended a psychic show on a Friday night and went missing that night. And the psychic show was one of these psychics that claimed to foresee the future and all this stuff, but apparently didn't see the future for poor Stephanie, because there was no warning. And I followed that and actually became more involved because I took part in search parties looking for Stephanie, because she had been missing for long enough where they weren't sure if she was coming home. And unfortunately, the day that I went out and was in the search party with her, I actually broke away later in the day because I didn't think, just things were screaming at me, thinking like, I don't think they're looking in the right place, and there's a lot involved, and you have to listen to the Squaring the Strange show to get all the details. But eventually they did find her that day. Unfortunately, they found her body that day. And it was very sad, but it was very emotional and personal, because that's, I'm used to sitting here or going out to a building, or dealing with witnesses for like a ghost story, and it's not a really big deal. But when you get emotionally wrapped up into it, where you're actually trudging through the swamp, looking and thinking like any second I could literally walk up onto a body, like this changes it. So it was a very, I feel weird saying I enjoyed the investigation. I guess the investigation part I was into, not really enjoyed it, but I was really into it because I really wanted to resolve this. So that was part of my case. And I looked into the psychic that was part of that show. And she's a semi well-known TV personality kind of thing that we talk about on the show, but obviously she didn't predict the future. She didn't save this young lady. And then there was another psychic that gave predictions that where the body would be found, and all this, which turned out to be completely false. I mean, everything this alleged psychic said was off the mark. And that was confirmed after the body was found and all the facts leading up to that. So,
yeah, I just want to. I'm especially proud of that 2-part investigation that we did. And Kenny, I think everybody really enjoyed your role in all of that. And again, it's the sort of thing that I think is useful for skeptics to watch and to listen to, because it's something you can do. Yeah. If you're the next time there's a high profile missing persons case, just pay attention to it. Just pay. If there's a news, go online, type in the missing person's name plus the word psychic, and oftentimes you'll come up with some local news story where some psychic is saying something.
Right.
And just make a note of it. Get a screen capture, write it down, because sometimes they'll change it afterwards. And just see for yourself. And again, these aren't cases that we all knew were not going to be solved by psychics. Like, oh, we're gonna cherry pick these to show the ones the psychics didn't do. No, we were willing to follow them through.
Yeah. So. And you were strict about that. Like that we had discussions about it, and you were strict. Like, we're following it real time and see what they're saying, keep track of it, and then up to the point where we did the show, like, what do we know? Facts. What are the hard facts? Versus what the psychics were saying about it, and no embellishment. It was just this is what it is, and you can verify everything that we found. So, yeah, really, I mean, really intense, really interesting to get involved in something like that, and it made me more detail oriented. I mean, I was very into details anyway, but going real time, you really have to pay attention. It's really you got to be on it constantly. So really cool. But yeah, everyone check out that show. I put the link in the chat rooms. So check it out. I forget the name of the episode, but you'll be able to find it. It wasn't too far back.
Yeah, it was like maybe 9 months or so ago.
Yeah. So check it out. Let us know what you think. And then I think that's about it. You good?
Thanks, everybody. I'm looking at the chat. Thanks to Mike and Bob and Stacy and others who enjoyed the show. Thanks again for inviting me on. This has been fun. Let's do it again sometime.
Awesome. All right. So you hang on the line. I'm going to hit my outro video, and then we'll be done. So everyone, thank you again. Check us out tomorrow night. I'll be on Three Tortured Souls with Tim Vickers and Dave Schumacher. Check that out. And then again, if you're in the Philadelphia area, come out to Norristown, come visit, say hi. I'll be there set up at the Selma Mansion all day, all weekend. So with that, I will say, boys and girls, never stop learning.